Hi, and welcome to Thriving Gracefully. Are you yearning for unique and adventurous travel? Would you like to avoid the crazy crowds in popular international cities? Don't miss my adventure travel series to spark your imagination and travel planning. I've been to many fascinating and unexpected places such as Uzbekistan, Mongolia, Bolivia, and more, and I hope to inspire your next travel adventure. So for the first in this series, let's go to the exotic Silk Road countries of Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. They're fascinating places with unique and significant history, exotic architecture, plus beautiful natural areas and lovely people. And they're not swarming with tourists, so you can fully immerse yourself in the experience. Let's start with, where are these countries? Here's a map of Central Asia, which is located east of the Caspian Sea and Eastern Europe, south of Russia, and west of China. There are three of the five so-called stands, which were once part of the Soviet Union and are now independent countries. And going back centuries, Silk Road trade routes crossed Central Asia, facilitating movement of people, goods, and ideas between Europe and the Far East. We all learned about this in school. Historically, the area was populated by nomadic horse people of the steppe. Because of its position between major trade centers of Europe and East Asia, the region was subject to invasion. Arabs conquered Central Asia in the 8th century, establishing the region's Islamic roots. Later, the region was invaded by Mongolian and Turkic peoples, including Genghis Khan in the 1100s and 1200s, who destroyed the early Islamic architecture. A century later, Emir Timur, also known as Tamerlane, re-established the region as a center of Islam. His breathtaking monuments to the Islamic faith stand today in Uzbekistan. Our trip began in the capital city of Tashkent, one of the oldest cities in Uzbekistan. Evidence suggests that humans have inhabited the area for more than 4,000 years. What is today called Tashkent was a major Silk Road caravan crossroads, and it was invaded by Genghis Khan in the 13th century. And sadly, Tashkent lost much of its architectural history to a devastating earthquake in 1966, commemorated by a Soviet-era monument. Today, it's a modern city with tree-lined squares and boulevards, large Soviet-era buildings, along with mosques and madrasas, which are Islamic religious schools. In residential areas, kids swim in the canals to cool off in the summer. It's fun to see the locals in action. Tashkent possesses the oldest known copy of the Quran, although we were unable to photograph it. The Chorsu Bazaar is not to be missed, where merchants come from miles around to sell wares such as spices, produce, livestock, woodworking, embroidery, and this amazing bread. It's just delicious. Tashkent is also known for its spectacularly decorated underground metro stations, each with a different theme using granite, marble, chandeliers, and mosaics. They're intended as art galleries for the people. Now, stay with me as we head next to the dazzling city of Samarkand. But first, a few facts about our trip. We found an agency that helped us to plan a private itinerary with our own drivers and guides, and this allowed us to go at our preferred pace and to do things we enjoy, such as in this case, hiking in the Chimgan Mountains near Tashkent and in several other places, which is not on the typical group itinerary. This agency and others also offer group tours, and there are agencies that do all-woman tours to this region. With an easy search, you can also find tours to Central Asia with a heavy outdoor emphasis. Check out the description below for a few other important travel tips for going to this region. Now on to Samarkand, Uzbekistan, with its gleaming monuments erected by Tamerlane and his successors, the most famous being Registan Square. This is a giant square flanked on three sides by madrasas. Again, these are Islamic schools that were constructed over 200 years between the 1400s and the 1600s. Islamic law prohibits mirror image symmetry, which accounts for the difference in their facades. These are massive structures with intricate mosaic details and breathtaking in person. There are numerous other sites in Samarkand, which is a World Heritage Site, including the Shah Izinda complex of tombs and mausoleums, which are exotic and beautiful. Besides the monuments, Samarkand has the wonderful Slab Bazaar, great people watching, and the opportunity to visit a carpet factory where I bought a beautiful rug for our entryway. One thing I love about international travel is trying new foods, and Uzbekistan did not disappoint. In Samarkand, I visited a family who bakes bread and enjoyed watching and even helping with their process and eating the result. Then there was an amazing dinner in the backyard of a private home, and the food was delicious. We loved Samarkand. Now on to Bukhara. It's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Another stopover on the Silk Road. Bukhara's ancient architecture is very well preserved. From its soaring minarets, its striking madrasas, to its historic mosques, Bukhara is an absolutely essential stop on your visit to Uzbekistan. It also has well-preserved caravanserai, which are the buildings that once housed the merchants and their horses and camels during their long travels across the desert. Those were really interesting to go inside. While in Bukhara, we were introduced to the art of Uzbek suzanies, which are stunning hand-embroidered textiles. I purchased a table runner and 2 lovely pillowcases. I even got to try embroidering a classic Uzbek image of a pomegranate. I later finished the project at home quite proudly. That night we were treated to a homemade version of Uzbek plav, which is Uzbekistan's national dish and a daily ritual. It's a filling rice pilaf cooked with meat, onions, carrots, garlic, dried fruit, and lots of oil. When we travel internationally, we prefer to stay in well-appointed accommodations that are owned and operated by locals to get the most authentic experience. Both in Samarkand and Bukhara, we stayed in small hotels which were converted Jewish homes, and the synagogues were used as dining rooms. Next is a drive to Khiva. Along the way, we met an Uzbek couple who were so surprised to see Americans that they wanted their picture taken with us to show their friends and family. FYI, we did not encounter any other American tourists during our trip except at the airports. The area around Khiva has been inhabited by humans for 7,000 years, and the old city is characterized by its amazing fortress wall, complete with fierce-looking features designed to keep intruders out. Khiva is famous for woodworking, reflected in its architecture and its artisans. People still live within the walls of Khiva, and it's possible to explore the entire old city on foot. Of course, we enjoyed Uzbek hospitality. We flew from Urgench, a city near Khiva, back to Tashkent, and then to Almaty, the largest city in Kazakhstan. It was once a Silk Road stop until it was destroyed by the Mongols in the 1200s, and there are no ancient buildings. Almaty is famous for wild apples, and some scientists believe this was the area where the apple was first domesticated. There was a fun visit to a local park, and later I popped into a Starbucks. This was the only Starbucks and virtually the only American anything we saw in Central Asia. At lunch, we tried horse meat. Let's just say I didn't love it. Almaty has a museum with a huge collection of Central Asian musical instruments that's housed in a century-old Russian-style building. We stopped in at the stunning Zenkov Orthodox Cathedral from the era of the Russian Tsars. Speaking of the Russians, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan were all occupied by the Soviet Union for more than 70 years until 1991. So while each country has its own language, the common language is Russian, and the Russian influence is everywhere, from the style of the government buildings to the use of the Cyrillic alphabet. We took a peek into the Zeloni Bazaar, complete with its row of counters selling horse meat. After enjoying the sights of Almaty, the next day we hiked in nearby Charyn Canyon with interesting rock formations. We barely scratched the surface of Kazakhstan, the richest and largest of the stands, with vast mountain ranges ready for outdoor enthusiasts. We would love to return. After our Charyn Canyon hike, we were driven to a remote border crossing from Kazakhstan into Kyrgyzstan, which we're not allowed to photograph, but we did take a photo with our guide before we said goodbye and headed into the stunningly beautiful Kyrgyzstan. We drove through a vast stretch of farmland and open land on our way to the small Kyrgyz town of Karakol. There we saw evidence of a blend of cultures. After a visit to the Holy Trinity Russian Orthodox Church, we visited the mosque of the Chinese Muslims, the Dungans, who settled there fleeing persecution from Western China. Their mosque is much more Chinese in character than those we saw in Uzbekistan. We had several meals in private homes set up to welcome tourists. And we had a lovely hike in the green and beautiful Jyrgalan Valley and around the Tulpartash rock. Locals say that the Jyrgalan region is blessed by God, and that if you walk around this rock 10 times, it will bring you good luck. So we, of course, had to try it. I'm not sure that rock brought me much good luck, because photos from the next part of our time in Kyrgyzstan are limited, since I was sick for a couple days and then I managed to drop my phone in an outhouse. Gone forever. Word to the wise, never put your phone in your back pocket. Luckily, my photos were backed up except for those taken on the day of the loss. On a fateful day, we went to a cooking demonstration and helped to cook lunch in the small village of Bokunbayevo, I'm not sure that's pronounced correctly, near Lake Isykyl. We made traditional Kyrgyz borsak, which are strips of dough rolled and fried as an accompaniment to the meal. We also experienced traditional Kyrgyz eagle hunting. A local burkutchu, or eagle hunter, took us out to the steppe to watch their trained hunting eagles in action. The Kyrgyz people have used eagles to hunt for over 1,000 years. We also went to a local yurt maker's workshop for an interesting glimpse into the process of making yurts, which still house steppe people today. Sadly, my photos and videos of cooking, eagle hunting, and yurt making were lost with my phone, so I had to use stock photos to give you a sense of what we experienced. We rounded out our tour of Kyrgyzstan with a delightful stay at a yurt camp along Lake Songkul. This high-altitude lake sits on a large valley surrounded by mountains, and the scenery is just stunningly desolate and beautiful. It was one of my favorite experiences during our trip. We then drove to Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan, and headed home. Our trip to Central Asia was a most memorable and unique adventure, and I hope you'll think about adding it to your travel wish list. If you liked this video, you might also enjoy my video on solo travel for women over 50. And as always, please hit the thumbs up button. Feel free to comment and ask questions and share too. I invite you to subscribe to this channel to see the upcoming videos in my adventure travel series, as well as other topics here at Thriving Gracefully. See you next time.